You know, when I was growing up in the deep South on my family farm, working from sunup to sundown, we had our favorite crooners. And I love Joe Simon, Isaac Hayes, and Joe Simon used to sing this song, I've been down one time. Then he'd go on and say, I've been down 2 times, and I've been down 3 times. And he used to say, I've been down, drowning in the sea of love. I'm drowning in the sea of blood stocks, a shock with the stock market. I'm so bloody, I'm bleeding so bad, but it's okay. It is okay, okay? Because listen, Donald Trump tariffs have sent deliberate shock to the heart of the global economy. And boy, do we have the experts just itching to talk about it on this Saturday, April 6th, and I'm Armstrong Williams, and welcome to the broadcast. Let's get busy. Annie, let me start with you. Ann Bradley, welcome to the broadcast. First time, we're gonna start with you. Whew, what just happened? Ooh, I'm not hearing her. I gotta move on. Whoa, I can't hear you. Ooh, that's not gonna work. Joe, what just happened?
Well, what happened this week was we saw the president institute the largest peacetime tax hike in United States history. This is going to be such immense pain, not just to businesses, but this is going to be immense pain to American families. If you take the total cost of these tariffs that are imposed, including, get this, a 46% tariff on Vietnamese imports, which if you take a look at your jackets that we're wearing today, there's a good chance at least one of us is wearing a jacket from Vietnam. We're going to see clothing costs spike, housing, we're going to see vehicles spike. The total cost of these tariffs for middle-class families is going to amount to $3,500 per year. And that's not including if you choose to buy a vehicle or remodel your home this year. If you buy a new car or even a used car, because those prices are going to be increasing as well, you could see your new vehicle prices easily increase by more than $10,000. I think it's an absolute shame that we saw a president do this, not just unconstitutionally without the approval of Congress, but to inflict this type of pain on American families, the worst that we've seen in decades, is inexcusable.
You know, I also used to listen to Clara Ward, and she was singing, pack it up, getting ready to go. Sounds like Carter to you. We need to pack up and get ready to go. Let me try Anna again. Annie, can you hear us now? Can you?
I can hear you.
Oh, there you go. There you go. Talk to us.
Yes, well, you asked me what is going on, and I think the problem is no one knows. And so this is causing a lot of chaos. The markets are not reacting well at all. And I think the biggest problem is that this is all based on a false notion of what trade does for individual families, for businesses, and for people. And so for a long time in the United States, kind of economic freedom is our superpower. And to walk back on that not only hurts American families, as was already stated, but it hurts our reputation globally. And a lot of people now are very rightly worried about a recession that this could plunge us into. And so the costs are very, very high, and the benefits are just entirely unclear.
So, Tony, man, I feel like I'm attending a funeral today, and the person that's been buried is our economy. Wow. I'm glad I got on black. But listen, let me go to Tony. What were, for those that are watching us today, the key industries and goods affected by the April 2nd tariff? And how do these new tariffs differ from previous U.S. trade measures, Tony?
So previous tariffs were focused on securing things like national security issues, things like trying to get other countries to comply with U.S. foreign policy. But the issue with these particular tariffs is they're focused on mass manufacturing goods, like from China, like Joel mentioned, from Vietnam. I did check my jacket. It didn't say Vietnam, but I know I probably have some Vietnamese jackets. Now, the problem with this is that although a lot of people are suggesting they're mystics and forecasters of the divine and the beyond, no one, including the Trump administration, knows how these are going to turn out. We have some countries that are saying, yeah, we'll lower what tariffs we have. We'll try to play more nicely. Some, like the collective of the EU, is saying, no, we're going to get harsher. And I think that we're, of course, leaving out the pragmatism of Trump's economic views in the past that is probably going to change based on how the economy goes. And so my key issue with this conversation is that we've got a guy who walks into the doctor's office and he's got a cough, and we're like, ah, yes, I Googled his symptoms. He has cancer. He's going to be dead tomorrow. And that's a little bit of an overreaction, just a smidge.
Well, So let me stay with you a minute, Tony. It seems like everybody is affected by this. He's not trying to help the class of his donors that gave millions of dollars to his campaigns. Businesses are being impacted by it. Everyday Americans, the farmers, blue-collar workers are being impacted by this. And I saw a clip from the president when they asked him about this. It doesn't bother him. He says, it's what we have to do. It seems like he's so headstrong about it. So why would Donald Trump, knowing the political calculation, he has a little 2 years, he has a Congress who's also trying to push back on his tariffs through legislation, why would he do all this if not because he felt in the long run this is what's best for American and American interests?
So over the last couple of decades, if there's one thing that hasn't changed about Trump, it's been his policy on foreign trade, on tariffs. He is not the traditional Reagan conservative on the economy. This is something that a lot of those on the right who are not populists have been wary of for a while. And I think that given that I've known Joel for a few years, he would probably articulate that much better than I could. But as far as Trump and his motives here, I think that Trump believes that short-term pain will bring back a lot of manufacturing industry to the United States. And I'll be honest with you, it's a gamble. Now, it's a calculated gamble more than I think many of his critics are giving him credit for. And I don't know if it's going to work out or not. We do see a lot of auto manufacturing starting to set up shop here in the United States again, but propping up an industry like auto manufacturing is one of the things that killed us in the second half of the 20th century. So it's a gamble that really has way too many moving factors to dial in right now, but I'm not sure that the indicators suggest that President Trump is 100% correct on here, but also the United States being treated as the sow lying on her side for everyone to come up and grab milk for is not a great solution either. It's a catch-22, and this is really what no one's giving credit for.
Well, Joe, you know, there were warning signs prior to the announcement that Trump said he would do this, but how have the financial markets responded to the tariff rollout? And then also from a policy standpoint, Joel, do these tariffs strengthen or weaken the U.S. position globally?
Well, I'll tell you, we've seen this before, ladies and gentlemen, in 1930, right? Those smooth tariffs, you know where it got us? To the Great Depression. And so if you saw a movie before, you know how it ends. This is the sequel, right? These tariffs are destructive, right? They're not going to help anyone. They really aren't. And here's the key. These tariffs, you know what they are? They're taxes on the American people. You know who's going to be paying them? Not the businesses. It's going to be passed on to me and you. And we can't afford to spend an additional $3,500 a year. For the folks who are living paycheck to paycheck, you know what they have to decide? Between rent and groceries. This is what the economic impact of these tariffs are going to have to the American people. So we don't know where it's going. I disagree. We do. We've seen it in 1930. We're headed not even towards a recession, but towards another depression.
But you know what's interesting, Annie, is that we've seen the president threaten tariffs. Then they come to the table, they negotiate. He backs off, and he delays it to another day. And even as we have this debate that this is Armageddon for our economy, there are still countries that are being impacted by this, like Canada, Mexico, China, the European Union, who are showing a willingness to negotiate, to give the president opportunities to show them that they are trying to deal with the fact that there's a 300% markup on products that are coming to this country that is passed on to the American people. And there's an imbalanced trade here that the president is trying to correct. But does this mean that it's the end all? Hasn't the president shown his willingness to adjust in midstream? Here we go again. I'm not hearing you. I'm not hearing you. Do what you got to do. Let me try again. Can I hear you?
Can you hear me?
Oh, there you go. Whatever you need to do, you're doing. Okay. You need to stop it. You need to stop that.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead. All right.
Okay. So I think that he has shown, and certainly his supporters have continued to speak over the last couple of days, that this is a negotiating tool. And maybe it can be, but I don't think you can negotiate with the entire world and every country at the same time. And so the mechanism by which he's kind of establishing the tariffs, people don't even understand the math. It seems to be kind of arbitrary. And so I think that's the problem, is that it's causing so much volatility in the markets and regime extreme uncertainty in the United States that I think this actually harms our reputation abroad, even if you could get short-term goals. So I think the best outcome that we could expect here is that he does walk back on some of this. The fact that we are targeting Canada and Mexico is just preposterous. It makes no sense. These are our regional allies. They're our trading partners. They're our friendly nations. And Trump renegotiated NAFTA with them in his first term in favor of more free trade. When you look at China, a lot of people might get on board and say, okay, let's use tariffs as a way to kind of pivot what China is doing in the region. But then you look at the new tariffs, we're tariffing Taiwan and Japan and countries that could be our allies against China. So this just absolutely makes no sense. And I think that he's creating so much chaos that this is going to thwart investment in the United States. And this is a problem for American families and American businesses. So again, even if it is a negotiating tool, the costs are very, very high. And I argue those costs are high even if we don't follow through with this, because now we're very unpredictable. Instead of having a reputation for free and open trade, which we've had for many, many decades.
You know, Joe, what impact are we already seeing on American consumers and businesses? And is there a political strategy behind the timing of these tariffs with the 2025 cycle heating up?
We've seen impact on consumers actually continuing back to the prior Trump tariffs that were put in place during his first term and were actually continued by Joe Biden. Those are relatively small compared to these new ones, but those tariffs are actually costing families roughly $200 per year. Think back to when washer and dryer prices spiked early on. Some of those tariffs on steel and aluminum actually remained in effect, so we're still paying for it. The bigger problem with these tariffs is these tariffs are a multiple, roughly 10 times as large as the tariffs that President Trump imposed during his first term. And of course, in his first term, the danger of the tariffs, the harm, was counterbalanced by regulatory reform and real pro-growth tax cuts. That was a benefit, and I think it masked a lot of the negative impact of the tariffs. Right now, the tariffs that are being imposed are far larger, far more extensive. They're already wreaking havoc, of course, in our retirement accounts, but those costs are going to be very soon realized by consumers, especially on clothing and automobiles. In the next month or so, you are going to notice a discernible increase in the cost of those goods. And guess what? The layoffs have already started. We're talking about layoffs in the manufacturing sector. Steel plants have already been laying off workers. We've seen auto sector laying off workers, semiconductor plants laying off workers here at home. So this is a self-inflicted declaration of economic war on ourselves. And by the way, Congress has the power to step in immediately and stop this. They can declare an end to this so-called fake national emergency, declare it now, but sadly, we don't see much appetite to do so.
You know, it's Saturday. I must tell you, this is the first time ever on this broadcast, as it relates to the economy and something to do with the president, that everybody from all walks of life agree, which could signal the president has a real problem moving forward. We'll be back. A question for you, Tony. Are they our allies when they put tariffs on us, Japan, Taiwan, Canada, and all these countries? Don't you think they want this to fail? They didn't want it from Obama, the Bushes. They never want this because they want to continue to exploit and take advantage and pass on these high costs to Americans. And if we don't step to the plate and say we're going to stop this nonsense, when do we do it? Many of Americans have said, I'm willing to make the sacrifice. I'm willing to suffer a little bit because these practices are so unfair. Do you think those that place tariffs on us are upset, that the American people are upset with Donald Trump right now? What is the balance here?
So there are a couple of things that are true here. Number one, there are a couple of different kinds of tariffs that they've placed. So a lot of the Canadian tariffs, for example, are quota-based tariffs, meaning that if the Canadian economy purchases a number of a certain kind of good, say lumber or dairy from Americans, and it reaches a certain point, then those tariffs are set to kick in. That hasn't happened a lot, but that's a different kind of tariff. Some of the tariffs that have been set in place, like some EU tariffs on the United States, yes, are to prop up industries in their own economy to try to produce local goods or closer goods that do take advantage of the United States. Those are objectively taking advantage of the U.S. economy and how we have our trade system set up. Now, that said, this brings us to something I very much disagree with one of our co-panelists here a little bit earlier, who said that you can't negotiate with the entire world. You can't just use tariffs to do something that's so unpredictable.
That was Annie, by the way, but go ahead.
Yes, as much as I enjoy, issuing blanket statements about things just for the heck of it, that's not how that works. You do issue large strategies when it comes to negotiation tactics in a blanket fashion. That's how the Trump administration has done so before. It's how the U.S. economy, it's how U.S. foreign policy has functioned before. And yeah, if the largest economy, if the largest foreign policy apparatus in the world wants to move at once in one singular fashion. We already see this with Canada, with Mexico, who, by the way, with the UMSCA are not currently required to impose these tariffs on USMCA goods. Those do hold in effect at a 0% tariff between both countries. You have India and you have Israel, which have already come to the table and dropped their tariffs. The negotiation tactic is already starting to work if that's the case. But that's not just his supporters saying that. That's a lot of people who don't like Trump that hope that he's using these tariffs for a negotiating tactic. I'm not one who's, happily marching along to saying, wow, these are the tariffs are the best thing ever. But I think that if we're looking at how Trump administration is trying to use these tariffs, I would say that if they are being used as a negotiating tactic, then that is a good thing. I mean, that is a mechanism that the president of the United States has to use. And I do think that Congress should be involved in this, as Joel pointed out. But as to whether or not other countries are allowed to use economic leverage against us whenever they want, and we're never allowed to do so in kind, we can argue about the scope, the timing, and the length of particular tariffs as a negotiating tactic. But yeah, it shouldn't be a one-sided thing. Other countries have just as much agency as the United States. They should be held accountable to that.
Annie, since he called you out, and Americans are not going to be upset and exploited and taken advantage of if they're buying U.S. manufactured products.
Well, I think that's true if the U.S. manufactured products are better and cheaper. And the only way to get that to be the outcome is to have more international trade, which means that we're going to have different trading patterns over different times with different countries. And so I think that Trump has a unique obsession with things being produced in the United States. And I think to a lot of people, that sounds good on paper, because it sounds like we have then the jobs, we have the manufacturing output. And if you look at manufacturing over time in the United States, we are a manufacturing powerhouse. Other countries would love to have our manufacturing prowess. It is also true that we have reduced manufacturing jobs over time. And so that is a reality, and that is always going to be true in a globalized economic world. And so I think the heart of the matter is, how do you deal with employment shifts and changes? How do you deal with the story about kind of these manufacturing towns that have really changed over time? And it's certainly true that lower income Americans have different opportunities. They have more limited income mobility. They have different school choice options. I mean, there's so many things that are going into this. And so I think we need to speak to that. As you mentioned earlier, we are all in some form of agreement on this panel today that these are reckless, bad ideas, that it's too much, and that it's causing a lot of chaos and havoc. So the question is, how can we protect Americans best? I don't think most economists believe that that's by just producing things in your own country. It's actually making goods and services more affordable over time, which means trading more with other countries so that we can promote the American worker. I think that's a hard message to sell. I think it requires the economic way of thinking, and we just have to kind of speak into that. I think what some people who are anti-tariff, what they do is they just kind of pretend that the unemployment in manufacturing is just a non-problem. Oh, don't worry about it. And I don't think that resonates with American citizens who have lost their jobs and they don't know what to do. And they're wondering, how am I going to send my kids to college? Can I even do that? And so I think other parts of Trump's agenda, which is to reduce regulatory overreach and burdens, which really make it hard for Americans to afford a better standard of living, that has to be part of the story. You can't solve all the problems that we have in the United States with tariffs. So I actually think we're creating a lot more. But I think there's other problems that Trump is focused on that are really important and will help the American worker more than just these kind of really aggressive tariffs, which I think are going to make standard of living go down and cost of living go up.
I know Joel is nipping at the bit, but not just yet. You know, it's interesting because there will be long-term effects that these tariffs is going to have on inflation and job growth if they in place for too long. And I know China and other targeted nations will eventually respond. But I want to go to Joel to talk about to the heart of what Annie was saying, which is about small businesses and manufacturers. Will small businesses and manufacturers bear the brunt of these changes, and what does this move signal to our allies and our adversaries?
Well, they absolutely will bear the brunt, but here's the truth. They're going to pass those on to the consumers. So when you're standing at, let's say you own a t-shirt shop, and it used to cost you $5 to get it imported from China, and you sold that for $7. Now, with these new tariffs, it now costs $7 to get that. You will not pay the $7. You're not going to pay $10, because guess what? If I'm in a business, especially a small business, I'm not in it to just do good. I'm in it to profit. That's the purpose of owning a business. And if I'm in it to profit, I have to pass along these tariffs or these taxes onto the consumer. So absolutely, small businesses will bear the brunt. And the unfortunate thing you're going to see over time is, yeah, you're going to see small businesses close down. You're going to see folks start buying less. You're going to see folks lose just faith in the economy and in our ability to influence the world. This is, no one asked for this. Like, what are we trying to accomplish here? Just a year ago, right, our GDP was cranking at 7-8%. Now, if Trump had done nothing, we would have been at 3.8% growth. With Trump's actions, we're looking at contracting negative 3.6, almost 4%. That's problematic. Nobody asked for this. What are we trying to accomplish with these tariffs? And I know that's Trump's favorite word, but who are we helping with this? It's certainly not the American people.
You know, so Joe, let me, and I do like what Annie and Tony has injected into this discussion. But you know, there's a lot of propaganda out there, okay? And I want to talk about how this propaganda is being used to either impact America's feelings about these tariffs in terms of having it being the worst, because it's in the interest of a lot of these foreign countries who hire lobbyists to lobby against this and spread this propaganda, because people listening to us today would think that it's the end of the world, but they use this to justify a challenge, whatever the president is trying to do in terms of his economic policies. So how do we respond to make sure that while we criticize constructively what he's doing, there are also possibilities that it could be good for the American economy in the short and the long run?
Like, economic propaganda is a big problem, and the propaganda we see proliferating most abundantly is actually coming out of the White House. So look at the rationale that the president was using to issue these tariffs. He keeps claiming that we're simply putting on reciprocal tariffs on our trading partners. The reality is the United States imposes higher average tariffs on our trading partners relative to what they impose on us.
Interesting.
If you look at the list of countries and rank them by tariff trade barriers and non-tariff trade barriers, the Heritage Foundation actually has this report. They publish it every year. And guess what? 68 other countries have trade barriers that are actually lower than the United States, including Canada. So that's one piece of propaganda. If you look at the list of tariffs that were issued yesterday, the administration, President Trump, issued the tariff that we're imposing on those countries and compared it to the tariffs that they're imposing on us. I can't find a single instance in which the information was accurate. For instance, the administration levied a 17% tariff on Israeli imports. Well, Israel doesn't have a single tariff on any U.S. goods. So how did the administration come up with these crazy numbers? They were looking at the trade deficit. This is a completely different issue. It'd make for a great debate, but it has nothing to do with trade barriers. And lastly, the other propaganda that we continue to see out of the White House is this notion that our middle class is less well off today relative to where we were before we had free trade with Mexico and Canada. The fact is, the typical family today is earning $28,000 more per year in inflation-adjusted dollars compared to what they were earning in the 1990s, and we are producing around 50% more. We still are the world's manufacturing powerhouse.
So, Tony Kinnett, I know you are an investigative reporter with the Daily Signal. You do a lot of in-depth research on this. Speak to what Joel just said, but also speak to, because it seems as though we're seeing divisions between economic nationalism and free trade advocates right here within the United States.
Well, the problem with what both Joel and Joe brought to the table here is that Joel's argument, and I don't know, Joel, if you were saying that was the main source of the economic propaganda coming out of the White House. And of course, any White House is going to have certain terms that they set. You know, when Caroline Leavitt gets up to the press secretary's podium, she's going to defend the president's actions. Of course, we know that. But another comes in a form of what Joe said earlier about the small business that was selling cheap, tiny Chinese T-shirts or from Vietnam or wherever the T-shirt is from over in East Asia. And, well, we know that the working conditions over there, it's very likely, as we know in a lot of sweatshops, that was produced by slave labor or the modern equivalent of it. And so, therefore, as long as, you know, you're getting the cheap T-shirts, hey, slave labor is all right, you know, that's free trade, baby. I don't think the United States should be supporting that. And so if I'm looking at international policy, and there's a country like China, for instance, that is producing things through what is essentially slave labor, or sending something down to Mexico where they're paying their workers $1 an hour and then sending that back over the border because, hey, there's no trade barriers, so what does it matter? That screws over the American, and it's also complicit in a moral evil. And so by the way, in most things, I am all for free trade between the European Union and the United States, between Canada and the United States, between other Western nations, and those that participate in a decent moral structure, in a decent economic framework of rights and values and principles. I'm all for free trade in those instances. But when I'm looking at the regimes of China, or when I'm looking at someone I was arguing with, as many of us do on the online sphere, talking about the Bangladeshi industry exporting goods, I don't want to be propping them up with free trade agreements. That's ridiculous. That's insidious. And the idea that, well, you know, this is just going to be passed on to the consumer. I'm going to be real with you. Some goods, yes, are going to be more expensive. But the idea that what's most important is that the American consumer can buy a T-shirt for 99 cents that came from slave labor, as opposed to a couple of years where the economy is going to struggle, but we're not funding certain practices that are inherently immoral. I got to tell you, there are arguments against tariffs. This ain't one of them.
You know, what we're going to do when we come back, because it's hot here today, and I don't want to stress out anybody that's watching us today. So, you know, our very special correspondent, when we come back, Dee Bass, is going to talk about a little about stress and people being depressed and what we need to do to calm down and relax. Realize it's not the end of the world. And we'll be back.
It is easier to build up strong children than to try and repair broken men.
The streets are plagued with crime, violence, there's a lot of poverty, and it's all a result of lack of education that's happening in our schools. So it really is a crisis.
We come from very different political perspectives, but we've come to the same conclusion, and that is there is a crisis in the classroom. Children are being deprived of quality of life because they're being deprived of a good education. We must solve this problem. It's incumbent upon all of us to join hands together to get this done.
We can't afford to wait one more day before we address these issues, because every day we lose another child.
Let's stop the politicking. Let's stop the games. Let's really do something to give these kids a real chance at life and being a part of that American dream.
We need accountability for funding. Many of the districts where you're seeing very low test scores, students graduating with very low literacy and math comprehension rates, they are receiving a lot of funding. So where is the money going where our kids aren't being adequately educated?
If you believe every child is deserving of a quality education, please go to educationjusticefoundation.com. You know, I have so much respect for intellectual, well-researched, civil, educational dialogue that we're having today on the tariffs. I'm so thankful to our guests. And you know, calming the chaos is a call for clarity in a world. There's a lot of confusion and a lot of misinformation and a lot of propaganda. So this package that you're about to listen to highlights voices of reason and renewal. It's renewal, spring, healing, hope, and a path forward. And what you can see from this discussion are very turbulent times ahead. So now to help us make sense of the moment and bring perspective grounded in principle, we turn to our special correspondent, Dede Bass-Wilbon.
With all that's happening in the news, are you just a little stressed out? According to the American Psychological Association's 2023 Stress in America survey, 77% of U.S. adults reported stress impacting their physical health, up from 66% in 2019, a sign that collective traumas like pandemics and global unrest may be taking a toll. Historically, stress levels have fluctuated, but today's 24/7 news cycle and social media amplify our exposure to chaos. The drawbacks? Chronic stress can lead to anxiety, depression, heart disease, and burnout, robbing us of peace and productivity. I hit the streets to ask real people, how do you tackle stress? From music to unplugging, everyone's got their own way to fight the stress monster. But with all the stress and everything that's going on in the world, what do you do to relax?
Well, right now, like I'm out here now, walking. That's one of the things that I do.
Okay.
I also do jazzercise, which is an exercise class, and you use weights, and you get on the floor on the mat, and those kind of things. Go to church. That's a good stress reliever.
Okay.
Just family. You know, just lost a sister recently, so, you know, this helped me. Yeah, and this is really helping me today, just to get out in the air. But that's mainly it.
Okay.
I'm recently retired.
Okay.
So I have free time. So I try to, you know, visit friends and neighbors. We get together and all things like that.
So you try to keep yourself active,
keep myself
doing
active
things
and
that
busy.
you enjoy,
Yes.
like you said, walking and jazzercise.
Cooking is my other therapy. I love cooking.
Awesome.
That's my other therapy. So yes.
My mother is like my best friend, and she relaxes me, and I relaxes her. You know.
And so you enjoy some of the same things, doing some of the same things
and
together?
since I retired, I'm the, you know, take her to the doctor, we go out to eat, or, you know, we just hang out together.
And so being with family and doing the jazzercise, those are things that keep you from being so stressed?
Yes, yes.
Awesome.
I got to talk to my family every day.
That's awesome.
I love my family. And through
I
COVID.
can relate.
COVID.
I can absolutely relate to that.
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you so much. For a deeper perspective, I spoke with Lainey Ellinger, a prayer strategist who finds peace through faith.
I heard a counselor read a book say, life is tragic, God is faithful. And I've really seen that in my life, but I've also seen that daily time with the Lord and different rhythms of life really help me when things are hard. Just doing the day in, day out with Jesus. We were made to worship the Lord, so spending time worshiping him is really what we're made to do, and so just blesses us.
Lainey says daily rhythms like prayer and journaling help her manage life's chaos. She also emphasizes the importance of a weekly Sabbath and quarterly solitude retreats to recharge. Managing stress isn't just a luxury, it's a must for a better life. A 2022 Gallup study found that people who actively reduce stress report 30% higher life satisfaction and stronger family bonds. So whether it's a Sabbath, a run, or turning off the chaos, take charge of your peace. For the Armstrong-Williams Show, I'm Dede Bass-Wilbon.
Thank you, Dede. So, Annie, who are the biggest winners and losers domestically and internationally under this new tariff structure? Oh, I'm not hearing you. Come on, Annie. Can you talk now?
Yes.
Okay, please, go ahead.
You have it?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. The biggest winners, there's a narrow group of people who are, kind of organized as special interest groups. And of course, they're the ones that are going to help provide the information of what the tariffs should look like and how they should fall. So if you are an American steel producer, you can benefit from these types of steel tariffs, as an example. But if you are an American producer who uses steel as an input into the production process of a variety of other goods, then this actually does what was already mentioned on the panel, which is that it raises the prices of the producing that good, and those prices will be passed along to consumers. I think that this, kind of if you look at the tariffs across industry, across type, you see this story replayed over and over and over again. And of course, these were the groups that were in Trump's ear before the election who kind of wanted these tariffs to take place. So I think it's a story of concentrated benefits and dispersed costs. The winners win.
Let me ask Tony a question here. Did the administration consult with economists and industry leaders before making the announcement? Because it seems like everybody's up in arms, but who's in the president's orbit to influence this?
Well, I mean, economists are not a voting bloc. Unions are a voting bloc. And this is my biggest criticism of the Trump administration, is that we decided that the UAW gets to define what good foreign policy is. I'm sorry, Sean Fain sucks. I don't want to hear what he has to say about policy. He doesn't know anything about economics. And by the way, I grew up in a family whose dad's manufacturing job left to Mexico in 2008. So I understand the hurt that a lot of Americans are going through regarding manufacturing jobs. I lived it. But as far as the union getting to say that, well, we really think that this should be the Trump's economic policies, is not the best advisor in the ear. But as far as economists, there are economists that are in the Trump's ear, but those voices are also competing for individuals who Trump built a large coalition with to win the 7 swing states in the election. When you build a big tent, now you have more voices in the tent, and that is something to consider.
Joe, you're always shaking your head, so that's not unusual. But how might these tariffs impact the supply chain that is still recovering from post-COVID?
And I was nodding in agreement with Tony on the unions. But no, there are going to be severe supply chain issues similar to what we saw during COVID, when businesses are faced with uncertainty and businesses here are faced with not knowing what the price of goods are going to cost and what they can sell them for. That's going to put a lot of unpredictable constraints on that supply chain. And we saw this recently with the problem with the Houthis in the Suez Canal. There are some folks here that are in favor of isolation that were claiming, well, only a few percentage points of American goods go through the Suez Canal. Well, guess what? Because global trade is interconnected, even if our goods are not going through one of those specific ports, it can result in shipping costs going up 200 or 300%. So I think we're going to see a lot of unpredictable shocks like that. And to your point about who's going to win, a lot of the lobbyists and trade associations in D.C., their lawyers are going to be the big winners, a lot of money, and the bars and restaurants not far from here on K Street are going to be the big winners as well. But sadly, a lot of my friends, your friends and families, they're going to be footing the bill to the tune of about $3,500 a year.
So, Joe, you've got the last word.
Listen, I believe that we should take this bipartisan approach to respond to American issues. And I also believe that we don't necessarily have to step on the American people's backs or their necks to prosper as a nation. We've been known forever as the leaders of the world, and we cannot allow these tariffs to ruin our relationships with folks that we've spent centuries building. And so America is just a couple hundred years old. And I'm hoping that we can maintain this incredible Constitution that we fought so hard to build. So, again, this is a time really for us to get together, stay informed, and do exactly what you can to do to make sure that we prosper as a nation.
Joe, Tony, and Annie, thank you so much for joining us. Ryan Mcbeth is in the house, and so is Dr. Stephen J. Nichols when we return on the Armstrong-Williams Show. Stand down.
As a home buyer, you need a lender who cares about your home ownership dreams. United Security Financial has been helping families secure their dream homes for 30 years. We're a national fair practice lender that provides affordable mortgages and low down payment programs to eligible home buyers. To learn how United Security Financial can help you secure your dream home, call 1-800-373-4186.
And welcome back to the broadcast. So, Ryan Mcbeth, how are you today?
Fantastic, thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me back on again.
Tell us, before I do what I used to do, ask the questions, what's burning inside you today?
What's burning inside me right now is the rate of manufacture of drones in Ukraine. Recently, Ukraine just started manufacturing the actual engines, the motors to make the propellers spin. It used to be really the only place you could get that was China. And now the United States Ukraine is actually manufacturing these motors by themselves. They could theoretically become a source of parts for the United States.
So what do you think are the telltale signs of modern propaganda in news and social media today? Because I see so many things that pop up, it's just blatant lies, and you know it's just not true. I have not
heard any. Oh, I think the main sign is emotion. Does this thing create a feeling of emotion inside of you? If something gives you a feeling, like a strong feeling of emotion, that's probably a good signal that you probably shouldn't be sharing it, or that you are being manipulated in some way.
How do you think this tariff debate that we just had and the chaos it's causing plays in the hands of China and Russia and our adversaries?
Well, one of the things that I've noticed is that I know my lane. Just listening to your conversation with some of your guests when I was backstage, I had no idea what the heck they were talking about. And you know what? If I talked about the GBU-57 bomb, they probably wouldn't have any idea what I was talking about. Today, we are so hyper-specialized when it comes to our jobs and our knowledge and our understanding that it is very easy to manipulate someone. Are tariffs good? Are tariffs bad? I don't know. I would have to do my own reading on that. And that's one of the reasons people watch your show, right? They want to know the truth. They want to understand. But the way the everyday American can kind of protect themselves from China and Russia is to just learn as much as possible about every sort of thing. And I guess now we have to learn about tariffs.
You know, it brings us to an even bigger point, which is the heart of our discussion, is that, you know, there is no way that all of us are not going to be manipulated at some point in our lives. But how do you minimize the manipulation of Americans?
Honestly, you would have to turn off the computer. You have to encourage people to turn off the computer, turn off your cell phone. You know, it's the funniest darn thing. I've seen people who, you know, they're on their screen for about 2 hours a day, just scrolling as they're consuming content, and then they get in bed and they scroll for another 2 hours. Or I've dated girls who've sent me a funny Instagram reel and say I'm going to bed, and then 4 hours later I get another one. It's like, well, you know, 1 in the morning. What are you doing up? You should go to bed. It's very difficult to protect Americans because we have free speech. Even lying and even propaganda is free speech. But the way to protect yourself is to just turn off your phone, go read a book.
Dr. Stephen Nichols, I know you're listening to this conversation. We're glad you're joining us. What role should journalism and media play in combating propaganda? And are there algorithms, Dr. Nichols, and AI platforms amplifying or filtering out this same propaganda?
Yeah, I think we have to take this really seriously. Propaganda has mechanics to it, right? It can function well, people can package it well, but there's also sort of underlying dynamics that we gotta be paying attention to, and it's what you're just talking about. It's the constant flood of information and news. And what that does is it sort of wears us down, it desensitizes us. We stop reflecting, we stop exercising our muscles of critical thinking because we don't have time to reflect. We're constantly bombarded with breaking news. An early study of propaganda made the point that people can respond to propaganda if they have stability. And I think what this constant news cycle, constant coming at us urgent, constant saying it's the timely, there is a constant contemporary threat, can be destabilizing. And so we need to think about those critical thinking skills, maybe get the perspective of history and remind ourselves that there's a history here when everybody wants to catastrophize everything around us. And there are ways we can push back against this propaganda.
You're president of Reformation Bible College. And I'm curious to ask, what role does faith, education, and tradition play in forming intellectual resistance? And also, how does that sense of morality and moral striving play in not giving into gossip, spreading it, the propaganda, the manipulation, just to give us clicks because we want to be relevant, because so much of our lives feel empty. And the fact that we can get, and I would put it like this, we can get people to react, sort of thinks it gives us power.
Well, I think we go back to, we're a Christian institution. We believe in the historic Christian faith. For us, history matters. One of the students of propaganda was a French sociologist named Jacques Ellul. And he first saw Nazism firsthand in 1934, 1935. And then he sees what the Soviet Union does to Eastern Europe. And he makes the point that along the way, they tried to remove a history from these folks. And you saw this in removing their national monuments and replacing them with Lenin and Stalin and Marx statues. But removing that historical identity, again, destabilizes someone. And they're very susceptible then to the timely. And so one of the things we do and do for our students is remind them that we have a history and that history matters. But I think the other thing that's really important is having a standard. If you don't have a standard, how do you measure deviation? You don't know your way out here if you don't have some sort of standard line to judge by. And that's where I think, especially as people of faith, we have that standard, that measure that we can use and should govern then how we think and how we respond to things.
Ryan, should school, I know we put so much burden on what schools should do in sort of teaching kids how to identify propaganda, but is there a way to fight this propaganda without infringing on free speech?
Absolutely. So it would require the government regulating social media. That's probably the biggest spout of propaganda. And this can be done by a few simple things. The first is that if you're under 18, you don't get social media. There is an argument to say that maybe some people shouldn't be on social media anyway. Or at least children shouldn't be on social media until they've reached some sort of age of reason. The second thing you could do is that you could require that certain social media programs prevent people from sharing things more than, let's say, once an hour or once every 30 minutes. Things like that could actually kind of tamp down the motivation a social media company has to make something go viral, because the more outlandish something is, the greater the chance it will to go viral. And the third thing you could do is you could actually tax social media companies, which might require social media companies to charge for their services. If you're not paying for a service, then you are the product. And right now, social media companies make money by keeping you on as long as possible. How do they do that? They do that by showing you the most inflammatory stuff possible.
What kind of a challenge does it present for universities and colleges like yours today, Dr. Nichols?
Well, you think about these reading and writing and just good communication skills. They're sort of lost when folks are awash in a sea of social media. And being able to understand an argument, being able to analyze an argument, maybe take it apart and see where it breaks down. And then conversely, being able to construct an argument. And the true art of persuasion is lost in a lot of this. And also this is so image-based, and so you sort of move away from the word to the image. And so a college that wants to emphasize those critical thinking skills, communication skills, the ability to understand and even present arguments, It's harder and harder to do when students are conditioned in an opposite direction.
But how do you protect students from being indoctrinated, Dr. Nichols, and used as propaganda puppets?
Yeah. So again, I think it's helping them develop the problem-solving skills. It's helping them develop critical thinking skills, so that as they hear things, they are trying to be discerning. And here we are as an institution, we're faith-based, we have a very definite position that we take, but we also want to see our students exposed to other ideas and hopefully then see the merits of these ideas against those, rather than keeping them from other ideas.
Right?
I think taking seriously that they're thinking beings and help them understand that they need to go through life thinking and discerning and asking questions.
Good point. Ryan Mcbeth, with all the things that are being said in the media and through Trump and Putin and Zelensky, what is it going to take to bring about a peace deal between Russia and Ukraine?
Oh boy, that's a big one. In order to have a peace deal, you would need a number of conditions to be met. One of those conditions would be Ukraine would have to agree to give up some land. I don't think that's something they're going to do. Essentially, Russia wants to maintain the status quo, where if they can't have all of Ukraine, at least they can have the Donbass, which is essentially the two provinces of Donetsk and Luhansk, and perhaps Zaporizhia and Kherson as well as including Crimea. That is a very big pill to swallow. So something like that, where if Ukraine gave up essentially 20% of its territory, then you might certainly see peace from Russia, but that is probably politically untenable for Ukraine.
Listen, I cannot thank all our guests today for joining us. Annie, Joel, Tony, Joe, Ryan, Dr. Nichols, who's joining us for the first time, and also WGLA 24/7, the best production team in the business, and that's just a fact. The thing that we have to do is learn to do critical thinking. Just because we read something doesn't matter, believe that is true. We got to do our own research, use our own brains, and like what often we cannot say enough, it's just that we just got to get back to common sense. If it doesn't feel right, maybe it just isn't right, and you need to go a little deeper in your research before you embrace it. I'm Armstrong Williams. Thank you so much for joining us. Enjoy what remains of your weekend. We're out of here.